is the 1st of December, 1941. The Russian In a few days, it will be December 7th. On successfully accomplished before the long Russian winter sets in. The Russian winter forces the Germans, obliging the German juggernaut to slow and await the oncoming Russian winter.
We've all heard the story. Napoleon was defeated by the Russian winter. So was Hitler. But that's not quite true. The concept of general winter has long been used to explain military failure in Russia. In doing so, it often oversimplifies the actual causes of defeat, and more importantly, it minimizes the role of Russian forces. Leavenworth Paper No. 5 confronts this myth head-on. Through 3 case studies, it illustrates how harsh winters in Russia pose deadly challenges not just to attackers, but to defenders as well. And in doing so, it restores agency to the human factors, leadership, logistics, and tactical decisions. This video will cover the first 2 case studies, the Allied intervention in northern Russia between 1918 and 1919, and the destruction of the Soviet 44th Motorized Rifle Division by Finnish forces between 1939 and 1940. The time is March 1917, and the place is northern Russia. The Tsarist regime collapsed under the weight of war, corruption, and economic breakdown. By November, the provisional government had been overthrown by the Bolsheviks. Fearing that vast Allied war supplies in Russian ports might fall into German hands, the Allies decided to act. In 1918, troops from Britain, France, the United States, and Canada were deployed to northern Russia and eastern Siberia. The focus here is the Arkhangelsk front, where U.S. soldiers fought under British General William Edmund Ironside. Among the combat units were the U.S. 339th Infantry Division, 6,000 British troops, 500 Canadians, and 200 French. They were opposed by Bolshevik forces under Commander Sedlukin's 6th Independent Army, nearly 14,000 strong. Fighting occurred during one of the harshest winters on record, in remote villages like Bolshiozerki, nestled between the White Sea and the Murmansk Railroad. Combat in this region meant facing extreme cold, deep snow, and endless coniferous forests. There were few roads, mostly poor trails, separated by dozens of miles. Temperatures routinely dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius or lower. Key military changes included frostbite casualties exceeding battlefield wounds, firearms and machine guns freezing due to oil solidifying, artillery shells cracking from exposure, improper footwear forcing men to ditch boots entirely, portable stoves, heated rail cars, and even experimental snowshoes all proved insufficient. Allied trucks froze, Ford tractors failed, the logistics lifeline became the native sleigh and rugged Russian pony. One report noted Lewis guns that froze solid. On December 5th, Allied forces discovered that neither their cannon nor their machine guns would function. Without firepower, even retreat became a struggle. In March 1919, Red troops prepared a major assault on Allied positions at Bolshoi-Ozerki. Over 7,000 Soviet troops, supported by artillery, attacked 2,000 Allied defenders, mostly Americans, British, and White Russians. Red Army forces used surprise, cutting phone lines, and launching night raids, but defenders held. Temperatures hovered near minus 40 degrees Celsius. Snow was 3 feet deep. Allied soldiers, exhausted and frostbitten, still managed to hold off the attackers using machine guns, mortars, and grenades. Soviet morale collapsed. One regiment refused to advance. Reports from Red Army deserters noted that frostbite, hunger, and poor leadership took a serious toll. When Allied reinforcements attacked from the north and west, they used American trench mortars and flanking maneuvers through dense woods to overwhelm Soviet positions. The Allied campaign revealed painful truths about winter warfare. Movement had to be planned around location of shelter. Operations in deep snow were slow, exhausting, and vulnerable to ambush. Supply lines were fragile, roads were few, railroads were very exposed. Clothing and heating gear were mission critical. Both sides suffered massive non-combat casualties due to cold exposure. Soviet estimates claimed more than 500 frostbite cases. Allied reports were worse over, with 2,000 frostbite casualties across the campaign. This first case study showed that winter conditions were not neutral. They demanded specific training, discipline, and adaptation, and they punished both attacker and defender alike. The destruction of the Soviet 44th Motorized Rifle Division, our second case study, takes us to the Winter War of 1939. On November 30th, the Soviet Union invaded Finland without a formal declaration of war. Stalin's armies crossed a 900-mile border, attempting to overrun a much smaller Finnish force. The Soviets had more men, tanks, and aircraft, but were completely unprepared for subarctic warfare. Finnish troops, by contrast, were acclimated, well-clothed, and expertly trained in ski warfare. In the snowbound forest near Suomussalmi, the Soviet 163rd Rifle Division was surrounded by Finnish infantry. When Soviet commanders attempted to send reinforcements, the elite 44th Motorized Rifle Division, they marched straight into a trap. Finnish encirclement and annihilation tactics. The Soviet 44th Motorized Rifle Division was heavily mechanized but completely unsuited for deep snow and narrow forest roads. Tanks were confined to a single track, troops froze, and movement was slow and exhausting. The Finnish defenders, many were former lumberjacks in their civilian lives, used skis and camouflage to launch hit-and-run attacks by day and night. Wearing white, they could strike from any direction and vanish into the woods. On New Year's Eve 1939, Finnish ski patrols confirmed the Soviet artillery was entrenched near a narrow pass east of a roadblock. Using snowplows and sled teams, the Finns created a winter road across frozen lakes, allowing for supply and artillery movement. By 1 January, they launched their assault. The Soviet positions collapsed. Machine guns jammed, men froze in their sleep. Finnish assaults followed a strict rotation. Every 2 hours, troops were rotated to rest and rewarm. By January 7th, all major Soviet resistance had ceased. Soviet casualties from the 163rd, 44th, and 3rd NKVD Regiment totaled 22,500, while Finnish losses were under 3,000. Operational Lessons and Nazi-Soviet Winter Warfare, 1941 to 1942. As German troops advanced into the Soviet Union in 1941, they were utterly unprepared for the harsh winter conditions they encountered. The Red Army, drawing from its prior experience in Finland and northern Russia, was significantly better equipped organizationally and tactically. German soldiers lacked adequate cold weather gear and were forced to strip clothing from the dead to survive. By the end of the 1941 to 1942 winter, 100,000 frostbite casualties were reported. Soviet ski troops, such as those attacking the German 35th Infantry Division near Moscow on 5 December 1941, were well equipped and trained. Despite this, even the Red Army suffered large numbers of frostbite and exposure casualties, often due to conducting operations during the coldest periods of the year. Mobility and logistics proved critical. Russian ponies, nicknamed Panji horses, were indispensable for transport, able to survive with minimal shelter. By contrast, many larger German horses froze to death. German officers noted that Panji sleighs were among the only vehicles offering reliable over-snow movement. Some German panzer divisions used so many ponies that they were derisively known as Panji divisions. Soviet tanks with wide tracks and greater ground clearance also outperformed early German tanks, which were poorly suited for deep snow. By 1942, the Soviets had mastered the use of ski battalions for deep raids, one notable example being their successful operation against the German 12th Corps headquarters. Key observations from 1941 to 1942. The Red Army adapted lessons from prior campaigns. German command, by contrast, ignored or underutilized those same lessons, many of which had already been demonstrated during the Allied Archangel-esque campaign. No prior German military study covered operations in subarctic terrain. As a result, many German formations were ill-prepared. The Russian winter came early in 1941. Temperatures plummeted in November. Snow remained powdery for weeks due to high winds and blizzards, severely degrading German mobility. Even when properly clothed, German soldiers were vulnerable in minus 18 degrees Celsius or worse. German logistics collapsed. Winter clothing and supply distribution failed. Trucks couldn't move. Ski troops and sleighs proved far more effective than mechanized options. Final lessons. These case studies span more than 25 years and multiple wars from Napoleon to Hitler. Yet the core lesson is consistent. Winter favors no one. Forces that adapt to the cold through proper clothing, equipment, training, and shelter have a fighting chance. Those that don't will suffer. Key takeaways include sound carries farther in crusted snow, making surprise harder. Small, acclimated horse breeds outperform larger Western horses. Mines and artillery often failed in extreme cold. Charcoal heating was preferred to wood due to less smoke. Soviet tanks with wide tracks were better in deep snow. Explosives were vital for digging in frozen ground. Perhaps the most important lesson was the cost of ignoring these facts. As Luftwaffe General H.J. Rykhoff noted, German commanders dismissed winter lessons out of arrogance and paid the price.
In the end, General Winter doesn't fight battles. People do. And the armies that survive aren't the ones who curse the snow. They're the ones who prepare for it.